Good evening, everyone. Welcome to xLights Gem's presentation on an introduction to xLights using the sequencer. Please keep your microphone muted and your video off. And with that, we'll turn it over to Daryl. Thank you, Daryl.
Alrighty. So this one is the third uh, presentation on the intro series that we were kicking off, introducing here on the sequencer. So here's just a quick agenda. I'm going to recap the pieces of the UI. I'm going to talk about the timing waveform at the top, the timing tracks, the sequence tracks. I wasn't even sure what to call them, but we'll point that out when we get to it. Then we'll quickly go through some of the effects and then some of the effect options. So I'm going to obviously use xLights here, and so we flip back and forth, and I'll use the agenda to just make sure I hit all the notes that I tried to think that we needed anyway. So we'll start off with the UI recap. So we're at the sequencer tab. I just opened up xLights before the session started. I want to go cover what we're normally going to see when we start a new sequence. So we're going to create a new sequence, and I'm just going to click done. This is really not a presentation on sequencing. It's just more a presentation on the sequencer itself. So we'll go through that. The UI recap. So we have the color palette where we can choose the colors that the effects can use. If you don't like these particular colors, you can just double click on the color itself, and you can make your own colors. And you can choose from color palettes. So these are predefined groupings of colors, color choices, and you can just click and choose those. There's lots of options on every window here, so we can't obviously hit everything in this session, but just get you familiar, especially on an introduction. For an intro user, you're not going to be changing too much of this stuff, if anything at all. Maybe the only thing you might change on here is to use some sparkles, or as I like to call them up here in Canada, twinkles, and that will add some nice little subtle uh, colors to your effects. On the next tab over is layer blending. Again, as an intro, you're probably going to just want normal. It's how does it blend from one effect to the other. Normal is what you're going to want for most things. And I'm going to cover this in a second. Well, actually, I'll do it now. The in transition, if I place a effect on a prop, I just drag it here, and I'll move it down one just close enough. So if you're focusing up here in the model preview, this is in the layer blending, also has two options, in transition and out transition. And I'm going to change this to left so we get some colors moving there. I change the colors and crank up the cycles just a little bit. Close enough. All right, so just this basic one effect, I'm going to demo. You have in transition. There's a number of different transitions. I'm not going to go through them all, but we'll just start off with showing you how the concept works. It says I want a fade transition, and how long would you like to fade it in for 1 second? So you're going to get this little green bar to indicate that it's transitioning in for 1 second. So if I play this section here, press play, you'll see that it fades in before it starts. Maybe if I make it a little longer. And that drop down is just a hint or a suggestion. You can always change the number to whatever you like. I'm going to do that. And you'll see it fades in and gets brighter until it's totally in 100. So that's the in transition. And similarly, you have an out transition. So at the end of the sequence, you want to fade off the effect. Right? So click there. You go there. So that is the layer blending. And then layer settings over here is how it renders. And again, as we'll cover this in a little bit detail when I go down below. How does it render that? How does it show those pixels on the prop? And this is how much of the prop is covered in with this effect. So right now it covers the entire prop with the effect. If you want to say only cover the left half of the prop with the bars effect, it will cover only the left half of the prop. So you notice it's only half of the prop. Double click to restore it. So this is just a quick recap of the UI. The effect settings is where you're going to do all of the changes based on the effect you've chosen. So you have a bars effect. These are the properties that you can change on the bars effect. If you go down here, these are all the different effects, butterfly, which you can also choose up here by choosing the icon, or you can also use this button here or this icon here to drag a second butterfly out, for example. if you wanted to do that. I'll just delete that for now. Go back to the butterfly. This is all the properties that you would have for the butterfly. They're all basically the same. They work in the same manner, either sliders or numbers. If you don't like, you can change the numbers. Speed, for example, you might make the effect go faster or slower. And there's second to this other icon that's here is called a value curve. It's a little more advanced. Actually, it's very advanced, really. It allows you to change this value over the time of the effect. So right now it's set to 22. I'll make it 20, whatever. You can make it change from 20 to 30, for example. So maybe it starts at 20 and ends at 30. So that's a value curve. If you click on it once, it brings up the value curve setting. If you click on it one more time, it reverts it back to a static number. So you'll notice that in the UI, you have value curves in a number of places. Again, that's probably a more advanced feature, so we're not going to dwell on that too much. Over here, of course, is our sequencer here. We'll bring this back. And then we'll go into the parts of the sequencer. The top portion here is the waveform or the timing waveform. Since we have an animation, this portion here is blank. I'm going to switch it over to a audio track. So if you have a sequence based on audio, and I think I've got something here. Where can I go? Audio. Here we go, Baby Shark. Click done. Click done. So here in the timing waveform, you have the blue waveform and to indicate that there's audio. There's that. If you right click, you can make it twice as high if you really want to accentuate the waveform. You can also break down the waveform into different sections. Probably not something anybody really needs to use, but it's there as an option. You have the cross hatching here on the right. That indicates the end of the sequence. So it's based on the audio you've selected, and it determines the length of the audio, and it shows you there. If you double click in the section, it zooms in, or similarly, you can zoom back out up here with these buttons. So zooming in, zooming out. That's the waveform section. You have the timing track section here. This is the different color option. By default, it creates a new timing track, which has nothing in it. You see it's all blank. This is where you can place little marks in here called timing marks. And you click on the blue waveform, you hit the letter T, it creates a timing mark, creates a timing mark, creates a timing mark. These could be places that you use as a reference to line up your effects, or just to maybe even create sections that says this is the intro, for example. Now, all I did was shift, double click on that section, and you can type in different pieces of the timing track. So this is really guidelines so that you can line up things and put effects on later on. You can have many timing tracks here. Right click, you can add a timing track. You can create an empty one. You can say drums. Maybe you want to indicate where there's a drum kick. You would listen to the audio, you'd hit the letter T, and you could basically create timing tracks for each of the different sections that you want to sequence to. There's also a ability to add a timing track and using what's called Queen Mary Vamp. Again, there's a lot of choices here. As an intro to sequencer, you might just be looking at beats and bars. Those are probably the two things that you're going to focus on. If I create beats here, it will take a moment. It'll analyze. You can just click OK as an intro user. You don't need to be too worried about that. It will go in and create 1, 2, 3, 4 counts for the beats for the audio that you've collected, that you've loaded up. Again, these are just guidelines. You select which one you want to highlight or which one you'd like to use. If you went down to beats, you can put an effect here, and it will drop in right in between those guidelines, those timing tracks. So you can use that as a way to help you in your sequencing. Um, so these are the timing tracks. You can right click, you can import them as well, which means you might be importing it from an external tool. Auto lyric align is an advanced thing that would allow you to pull from outside. You may get it from somebody else. You may be importing um, timing tracks from a different sequence or song or a different copy of the song, for example. There's also the ability to import lyrics and such. That's probably a whole different topic on singing tracks. So I'll leave that for some other time. You can also have the ability here to hide them. So if you've found that you don't need to see them while you're sequencing, you can hide them with a right click, and you can right click and show them all again. So that's just a feature that was added there so you can hide and show them. So that covers the timing tracks, the timing area here. There is this is with the sequencing track. I just want to go through a few things here. You have what this symbol here tells us those are groups. And a group, if you select it and if you double click it, it will expand the groups and show you all of the models that are in the group. Ideally, it's indented. Sometimes it gets kind of tricky to see them, but it is indented to show you that the group is made up of these elements. These elements may or may not already be listed below, but they can be sequenced down either up and here. If I put the butterfly effect here, you'll notice it'll be here, but it'll also be down here as well. So don't be confused. There is only one Arches model on your show. It could be in the group or down below. It's exactly the same no matter what you use there. These little colors here, I don't think I covered that when we were doing the layout last week, but yes, I think I did. These colors are the color tags that were created back on Arches left. And if I went down to string properties, no, appearance, somewhere in here is tags. There it is, tags. So it's orange. So there is the color that you're seeing for tags, all right? That's how that helps. It helps there. So we have a group, has a model, and then from a model, if you double click the model, you'll get either the strand, which is the string of pixels, or you may also see the submodels, if there's any there. So let me show you that example. So I'm going to close the groups, and I'm going to expand this group, which is everything, and I'm going to double click the, oh, probably this one here, the steam engine. You can see there that it's the steam engine. And unfortunately, it's not very indented very well, but maybe we'll get that fixed up at some point. And it breaks down all the submodels. And then if I scroll through all the submodels, the very last one is either going to be a strand, which is all of the pixels combined, or it's been renamed and it says my custom model. So think of it as a group, a model, a submodel, and then the strand. And if I get real daring, I could double click this and I get down to the nodes. That's the actual individual pixels. You won't normally be sequencing at the node level, but it's there as a debug tool more than anything else. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I double click the arches left, there was no submodels, but each strand is going to be the entire pixels. If I double click the strand, we should see, maybe not. Maybe you have to render here. Maybe I'm going to break things.
I think
I was expecting to see the nodes to show up here.
Daryl, I think your feed.
Oh, my fading is fading too much. So let me stretch it. There we go. Thank you for that. So because the fade in was it was all dark, so you couldn't see it. So this gives you a quick view of how the nodes will look over that time period. So this is more of a debugging tool than anything else. If you double click it, it disappears. And if you double click the model, it disappears again. So that covers that issue there. And from this section, I just want to go another step, is the ordering of this section. It's very important that it's ordered the proper way. It's a little bit advanced, but we'll go to the edit display elements. This is the order that it created them in. It's almost somewhat random. I think it's based on how I added the props, which is really meaningless. You really don't want to be sequencing at that point. So simple to say that I'd like you to right click here, sort, and sort it by name by size. You'll get the group at the top, the group, and then everything's alphabetical. So this way you get the list of all your props in a good order, and that's expanded out if you recall. So I'm going to just close that up. And the last piece that we have on the sequencer is the view. The master view is the only view that really matters to xLights. That's the view that xLights uses to determine how to show those effects on your show. Think about, we like to reference it like baking a cake. So it's going to start at the top, and it's going to put the icing on the cake, then it's going to put the writing on the cake, then it's going to put the florets or flowers on the cake, and it's going to put the writing on the cake. It's got to be put in that order, otherwise you won't see the writing on the cake. It'll be buried by the icing. So you got to put it in the right order. And by creating it in the master view and in that option that I showed you how to sort, it'll go in that proper order that you need. And so that's the master view. But you can have other views. The other views are just simply a way to isolate stuff or to simplify what you're working on. So let me show you how to do that. You right click, edit display elements. You can add a view. Maybe I'm going to say I want my candy canes. Click OK. And I just want my candy canes in there. And that's kind of boring, but you get the idea. So candy canes. And now all I see is candy canes. Everything else still works, but only the candy canes will show in this list. Let me go another one, and I'm going to go right click here, edit display elements. I'm going to create a new one, and let me go with yard props, just as an example. In my yard props, I did the train, I got my arches. I'm just double clicking on each of the elements I want here. The order here is only used for this view. xLights doesn't care the order here in terms of rendering it. It can be whatever's convenient for you, but you can certainly use the same philosophy. But in this case, maybe I just want to go by alphabetical, just because I want to see them easier to find in this list. So these are only used as a tool to reduce what is shown in the sequencer. The master view is the one that really matters in terms of the ordering. It will have all the props in it that have effects, whereas these ones can have any number of props, any subs, any props that are in your master view, but just narrowing it down for what you want to use here. All right, so effects. And I don't think there's anything else I wanted to miss here. Oh, wait, one more thing. So here are all of the props. I showed you the groups, the models, the submodels, etc. There's also another feature here which adds layers. So if I say insert a layer below, you get a little minus sign, plus sign. You can expand the layers. And what that allows you is to have multiple effects working together on that same prop during the same time. So here you might say, I want it to average the two together, for example. So you can have multiple pieces together. So those are layers, and I can collapse the layers, expand the layers, and collapse the models, submodels, and strands, everything like that. All right. If we go over here, I just want to make sure I'm right. Just let me check the things. Okay, yeah. I wanted to cover. Let me go back to my slide here one sec. That color palette, model house preview. Let's go with. Okay, let me show you that. So I showed you this effect. The two other pieces I just assumed I just neglected to talk about it, but this is the model preview right click, reset will reset it in the center. It's going to show only the prop that you've selected, or unless if you have a group selected, if I move this effect up here, it would show, oops, that's not a group, of course. Let me create a group of arches here. I'm going to click all these. Oh, I have a group of arches. Notice how I made that mistake. I did yard props. I didn't include my group here. So let me edit the display elements. I'm going to put my group in there as well. Order doesn't matter. It'd be convenient to move it to the top, but it's not super critical. Now you have a group of arches, and you can see that all four are lit up in the model preview because you're on the groups, and it's going to show on the in the house preview as well. But if there's other effects here, and there, you would see that the train also lights up in the house preview. You can move around by holding the wheel down to move it left and right. You can zoom in, zoom out using your scroll wheel. And I've showed you before, you can right click, reset it, and it'll put it back into the center for you there. And that's that one. Docking, on the house preview and the model preview, you can move them out. And if you're holding the control key down, it won't dock, right? If you're not holding the control wheel down, it will essentially dock into place. There was an option added, and I'll show it to you here under Windows, Suppress Docking. I've got the house preview set so that it won't dock, but I have the model preview set so it will dock. That means if I move the model preview around, it's going to want to drop it in between here. You see how it turns a darker blue? So it's going to drop into place. So that's the difference between no docking, where it won't go anywhere. It's just going to stay on top all the time, or the ones that allow you to docking. Now, if it says docking and I hold the control key, it won't actually dock. It'll just stay there. But if you're not careful, it will drop into place when you didn't want to drop into place. If I expand out the window, I'm going to hold the control key down, and you can see that it's not going to dock. I can move it off to a different monitor, which you can't see, but it's over on my right-hand monitor, or you can bring it back. If I drop it in here on the left, it's going to go into the leftmost position. All right. And let's go back here. One of the other topics I had were hidden gems, and that means you have an effect on the effect grid. You can do things like Control Shift left arrow, it will move over the effect to the far left. If you Control Shift right arrow, brings it all the way to the right. If I bring it back in, and I'm going to go back to my master view because I want to see some of these lines here for me. From here, you can do things like have an effect. You can right click. You can say, I want to duplicate an effect. And I'm going to say I want to duplicate it 2. And it'll go 2 more times. You can see, boom, 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 automatically. And other ones are, again, these are hidden things that you may never see, but just remember to use that right click option. Perhaps you want to split it in 2. You can do that. Another thing is if you click, so here is this effect here. If I want to split it right there, I can right click on that spot and it will split right there in that spot. Of course, maybe it's not perfect. You can just tweak it a little bit. But if you want to split it here, click on it and it splits there. All right. So there's a little hidden gem on those. Moving the sequencer, you can click on an effect, arrow it up, and it will move up. Note that in this case, it's part of a group, so it's showing here and it's also showing down below. But remember, that's the same effect. It's just showing multiple places. So don't be fooled by that. We are using it right now as part of the everything group. So if I close that, then all of a sudden I got to come back down here and find the effect that was on the Biscoy. Actually, I don't think it's there anymore. But there we go, expand it out. There's that one. Some basic keys are available. Copy and paste, so Control C, click over here, Control V, you can paste it away. You can right click and do the same thing. Copy, right click, paste, some basic effects that you can move around. That's pretty common. And I think that's what I want to cover there. Oh, wait. Another option that we showed on the layout last week, but you can do the same thing with effects. And that's where you click multiple effects right there. You can right click. You say, I want to align the start times, and it will bring them both to match the start times. Click, click, right click, alignment, align the end times, and you get them both lining up. So those are some basic steps for using the sequencer. And that's what I wanted to cover there. So go there. And let's go back through the timing waveform. I think just make sure I covered everything there. The timing waveform, I mentioned that it's music-based. If you have an animation, which was how we originally started, you can edit the time that's in the animation. You really shouldn't modify the time of a musical sequence. That is really controlled by the audio that you're selecting. If you don't, if you want to go longer or shorter, you really should alter the audio track. There's a couple of options here to do that. That's probably a more advanced feature. Ideally, or normally, you would just use the length of the audio. Don't tweak this number here. You may think it's working, but xLights really is going to use the audio track regardless of what you've set in here. So don't be messing with that, okay? Talked about zooming in and zooming out on the waveform. And show you another piece here. When you select an audio track like this, so I'm just clicking, I'm clicking at the 5, dragging it to 7. You can see that it's selected 2 seconds worth of audio, and you can play that section, and it will play that section. Luckily, you're not hearing Baby Shark. You can make it replay just that section, and it will just replay that section over and over again. You can also do something where you click here, and if you hold the control key down, it will scrub through the audio. Maybe I should change the audio so you can hear this, just because it's Baby Shark. You guys really want to hear this, right? Here we go. So here is replaying a section. And here's scrubbing through a section. So I'm going to click, hold the control key down. So you might do something like that so that you can identify where it does different pieces of the audio. You can hear the different sections of the audio. Another option here is if you find that this is more information than you need, or you need more area for sequencing, there is an option, probably not so commonly used, but under preferences, you can go to sequences, effects grid, small waveform. Click OK. And it squishes that down, really makes it small. Maybe it's more of a, if you've got a large monitor or whatever, you don't need all that real estate up here on the audio track. You can probably double height it as well, and you get essentially the same information without taking up so much real estate. So that's an option there, hiding under the preferences, and it's small waveform. One of the other ones that people ask for quite frequently is the spacing between these sections. That's actually this little option here under spacing. So if we set large, click OK, you get much larger area here. So that's a little, for my little screen, that's probably too big, but at least you have preferences there that you can choose which one that you want to use there. And snap to, we've got that. Icon backgrounds, what that is the background that shows up on not all effects, but some effects. And you have an option to hide it if you want. So if I bring a single strand effect, for example, bring it across, click on this guy, chase, and 2. You see how this tries to simulate what that effect is. That's called the background image. You have under the preferences, you have the ability to turn those off if you want. Probably suggest just leave it on unless you've run into an issue with it. It's perfectly fine to leave that on. And options to change to small. Okay, covered all that. And go to the next slide. Timing tracks. Yeah, let's just talk about, because we've covered this. So you have multiple timing tracks, you can do that. They're used for assisting in your sequencing, so lining up stuff. Queen Mary Vamp is sort of the go-to for getting beats and bars. It's probably a little bit of a challenge to install on the Mac side of things. And I know there's a glitch on whether or not it even runs on the latest Mac. We have to probably get some confirmation from other folks on that. Singing tracks, those are very important on the timing tracks. Those are what makes the mouth movements and such on singing bulbs and singing props. We'll leave that as a different Wednesday night session on how to do that. Importing from other sources, show these a right-click option to do that. Some things I didn't mention was it's often used for pairing with a VU meter effect, and it's pairing with states. So what that means is you might have the VU meter trigger that every time a certain node is reached or a certain volume of node is reached, or maybe a certain beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can trigger an effect based on that. And similarly with states, you might have a certain action, a hand waving, when it's every time it's 1 and 3, you have a hand moving. Or we had a train on the layout, for example. Let's go back to the layout. I believe you can do like the steam whistle, or it can blow smoke up, for example, on every 4th beat, for example. So you can use those timing tracks, these beat counts. So every 4th one, some action happens. And that's using a state effect, which is up here. And we'll cover that. And that's what I wanted to do there. And let's go back through the sequencing tracks. I showed you how to groups, models, submodels, and strands. We covered the layers. So those are when you have multiple effects on the same prop at the same time. You can have literally any number of layers. It can be 1 to 50 different layers. It allows you to uh, even they don't even have to overlap exactly. They may be fading into the next to the next. So you can do that. I didn't quite cover on selecting effects. Let me go there. Obviously, you can click on a single effect. You can hold the control, click on another effect. There also is a lasso, but you have to have the timing tracks disabled to do that. And then once it's disabled, you can literally draw a box around the effects. All right. So once you've got them changed or selected, you can see they turn a little purple. You can do things like using the cursor keys and move them left and right. And I think you can, I thought you can move them up and down. Oh, yes, you can. Here you go. Move them up and down as well. You can do that. You can even, it's a little trickier. I'm holding the control key down. I'm going to click on the one and then click on one more time. Oops, I double clicked on. There we go. Now I can slide them all as a group. All right. So the trick there is make sure you click on the last one and it's all purple, and then you can slide them back and forth. All right, so that's moving the effects. Ordering, we covered that. That's edit display elements. It's under right, edit display elements. So you can order them that you want. And we covered off the views as well. Basic effects. So let's just go through just a small subset of effects. I am going to create a new sequence just to get rid of what we have. I'm going to say animation. I'm going to say done. And just because we're here, I'm going to go File, Sequence Settings. And by default, it creates a 30-second sequence. I'm going to say it's a 120-second sequence. You can change the animation time at any point. It's only going to just make it bigger or smaller. And we have that. You can see that it now says 2 minutes there. So let's just start with just some basic effects. These are all the effects across the top. The on effect is really boring. It just turns on the prop. So we just turn on the prop. And I'm going to move it down to, okay, window frame, for example. So again, I mentioned before, every effect has its own set of properties. For example, the on effect, you can say, let's start it at 0. Well, let's start at 30% brightness, and then it moves up to 100. So very simple. You can make it go flashing back and forth, for example. Just feel free to play with those sorts of things, figure out what you like. Another common effect is the color wash effect. Basically, it's color washing. It's going to change from one color to the next. So ideally, you have two colors or multiple colors, and it's going to wash or change from white to red over this period. You can say I wanted to go white to red multiple times, and you can see the background tells you it's going to go 3.5 times. You can also tweak with these various different properties. You can say I only want it to be a vertical fade, so it gives you a little bit of highlighting that looks really cool. You can do things with the color palette. Right now it's going from, I'm going to put it back to count of 1. Let me just so I can show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to put it back to 1. So you can see it goes from white to red. You can say let's reverse the colors, and actually, yeah, doesn't, I guess it just reverses the colors. You'd have to go back here and say red and white. So now all of a sudden it goes from red to white. You can move the color choices to the left and right. A couple of options there where you want the color palette. So that is the color wash. Another common one is a shock wave. If you find when you're purchasing sequences or finding sequences and new free sequences, quite often there is a lot of shock waves, color washes, and single strand effects as well. Shock wave is just what it sounds like. It's going to create a wave or a explosion effect going outwards in diameter. Again, you have different properties for this effect, and radius is, I think, is the radius of the first circle, the black circle, and how wide is the outer circle? Um, and then this is the width of the donut at the beginning of the effect, and the width of the donut at the end of the effect. And you can move it off to the center. A lot of this comes with playing around to see what looks good for you. Note that there are some other tabs here. You want to look at the other tabs to see if there's something you might be missing or something that might enhance what you're doing. Cycles is how many times you want it to do. So again, you can see it's going to do the shock wave 11 times, 7 times, etc. Down here, don't forget, is the house preview. You can get a better view of what's going on. And there you go. You can see that the shock wave here. All right. So if you like that shock wave, you're going to click that, Control C, and I'm going to stick it on the star at the same time. I'm going to move it over a couple of things. And ideally, you're going to see the shock wave on the star and the mega tree at the same time. All right. Another one that it's probably one of the harder ones to master is the single strand effect, but really you can't go wrong with it. It's single strand, drop it on. Ideally, it's going to drop on a line, so you can see there. Actually, I'm going to throw it on the icicles. So I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to do a cut, which is Control X, and I'm going to paste it on the icicles, hopefully. Maybe not a good choice. It's not bad, I guess. And number of chases, chase size is how big is it going to be? You know what? This is probably not the best choice. Let's go back to where we were. Put it on a single line. And there we go. All right. So this one's a little harder to master in terms of what do these values actually mean, but feel free to play with them. Chase size is how many pixels are in that little snake, 36 of them, and we have one snake. If we put it up to 2 snakes, there are 2 snakes running at 36 pixels or 36%. I believe it's a percentage. So let's go back down to 30%. So now you have 2 snakes running at 30%, and it's going to run for 1 cycle through that effect. So from this beginning of this time zone, which is right there, and if I select it, you can see here, it is roughly 20 seconds long. It's going to do 1 revolution in the 20 seconds. And like every other effect, they have different properties. You can say, I want to go right to left, left to right. I wanted to go from the middle. You want it to go bounce back and forth, etc. So lots of different choices. The single strand has yet even more tabs. Each one of these is exclusive to the other. So if you go over to the skips tab, it really becomes a different effect. It's not using part of the chase and the skips. This is the skips itself. So this is where you'd often do more of a typical Christmas light display on your eaves, for example. So here we have red, green, white, red, green, white. The band size, which is how many pixels make up each band. So there's 2 pixels working together, and it's got 1 pixel in between. So it's skipping 1 pixel in between. And if you want the pixels to move, you can put the number of advances ahead, and ideally it is moving. Yes. Let's crank it up maybe. There we go. Slowly moving. So it's moving to the left. Obviously, you can move to the right, et cetera, et cetera. So the skip section here on the single strand is what you typically would find in trying to replicate a classic style of Christmas lights. The FX are WLED effects. And again, this is exclusive. When you're in this tab, these two are no longer part of the picture. It's only using what's in here. And there is, 20 or 30 different choices that you really just have to play through each one and find out which you like or which you might not like. You can just play around with those. One of the other ones that is very common on sequencers out there is the twinkle effect, which is nice background stuff. So you go, the twinkle is this guy here, and you put that on your all group, and you expand that out. And you can say, I want to choose some purple or cyan color, whatever that color is called. And it's kind of hard to see on the zoom here. I'm going to probably change it to white or something so you can see it. Go to white. And it just provides a nice background for your other effects. That's once we hit here, you'll see twinkle effects. Now your shockwave comes in there. There's your single strand effect. Window frame up here is doing our on and off, blinking on and off. So you can see how we've layered them together based on the fact that this one happens first, then this one will cover over top of some stuff. This covers over some stuff. Then this covers over some stuff as well. So they all work together. And we have that. So twinkle is a soft approach to it. And then as I was done just before this class was an example where we went through this as well. If I go insert a layer below, sometimes we want to do strobe. So the twinkle is a soft approach to the lights, whereas the strobe really gives like little flashes of light. So you can have them work together and have strobe. And I'm going to see if we can notice the difference. I'm going to throw in a blue there. You should be able to pick up the blue that is being strobing faster as well. You can make it, in this case, this one has a react to music. So you can have it reacting to the music. We don't have any music selected because you can tell there's no waveform there. How long does the strobe last for before it fades away? So these two working together can provide a nice background to your other effects. So if you want to have just something across all of your display, you can do that. So that's only 4 or 5 of the effects. There are 20, 30 effects up here. Really just got to play with them. And there's no expert on them. It's really just a matter of playing with them. Effect options. So we showed you how to place the effects on there. There's a few little things that we can do to enhance the effects. I think I've covered off a couple of them. That was like a transition. So if I move this over here, the color wash, the transition is what we talked about earlier. If I move this down with the slider, that's the fade in, fade out. There's lots of different choices here. But quite frankly, you're going to find most people use the fade. I don't think there's too much else used here commonly, but it's most often the fade. And if I go fade in, and I put that at 2 seconds, and then what happens there is if I move a layer above, I might do something like this. Again, I'm not a sequencer, so you might say, I want this effect to fade out. So it fades out for this little interval, and then it fades into the next. So it's not as harsh of a change from this effect to this effect. They fade and they work together. So that's how you can do that. We have another one here. There's talked about the rotation. So you can turn stuff. If we go, I want to do the bars effect. Bars effect. Let's go. Let's move this down. Mega tree. All right. So bars effect on the mega tree. All right. So we know you can turn the direction here, but I want to show you a different thing, and this is probably the easiest way to show it. So I have a bars effect. You can see it's going up. You can do a transformation and rotate it 90 degrees, and now you can see that it's going left. Now, obviously, I could have changed it here, but I just wanted to demonstrate for this particular effect that you can, and any effect actually, you can rotate it here as well. So if there's a certain effect that you want to have happen, maybe like the color wash is going left to right across your house, you can rotate it 90 degrees and it'll be color wash up and down, for example. So just keep that in mind. The transformation is up here. And um, that's it there. Render style, ideally you're going to have it set to default. There are some cases where default says, what is that effect? Oh, it's a tree. It knows that a tree is built in this dimension, like a triangular shape. It knows to keep that in mind when it's placing the bars on there so it looks appropriate. You can also change it to say per preview, which means how does it look in my display? Not necessarily that it's a tree, but maybe that's how you've uh, shaped it on your house. Here's probably a better example. Let's go to your house outline there, the polyline. I am going to drop a bars effect here. This is probably the best way to do this. And I'm going to see, so you can see it's all white. But if I say it is to the right, you can see it's white and red. That's the default because it knows it's a line. But if you said per preview, it's going to be treated like a grid. It's going to say, this is what the polyline looks like. And it'll be treated slightly different. And if I go to single line, it will put it back as though it's one solid line of effects. This really becomes obvious when I take this off of here and put it on the whole house. All right, so the whole house is doing a bars effect. You can see it's all white going across the house and red coming back in. Oh, that's because I got single line. That's why I was not doing what I thought. Default. So it's taking this whole image of my house and it's going white across to red. And then it's going to come back and do red across to white. So it's basically taking this picture and wiping across the picture. If I go per model default, all of a sudden now each prop is treated separately, white to red on each prop. Okay. And sometimes it's just a matter of going through these choices to figure out which one works best for your scenario. Single line, it's going to treat everyone like a line. So that doesn't really work well for some of these things because all of a sudden it's one long line of red and one long line of white. It's like it's one continuous string. So you wouldn't want to probably use that. There's other options here. It's just tons of different options. And that's more of an advanced feature, but we'll leave that there. We talked about the buffer. You can use the half of the buffer, left and right. Chances are you won't touch that. You just double click to put it back. And we talked briefly about layer blending, and that's the normal. That's probably what you're going to want for most of your stuff. That's thing. And also another topic here that is a hidden thing on the advanced features is right here. If you double click the red, if you don't like the red, you can change it, obviously. But you also have an option. If you right click on the red, it's called color gradient. And now all of a sudden you can say, I want it to go from white to red, all in that one motion. So you're actually like mixing colors. In that one box, you're mixing colors. You're getting a little bit of white, a little bit of red over the length of the effect. That's something somewhat more advanced, but it's there in case you see that choice and you're wondering, where did that come from? That's under the right click gradients. Okay. So I think that's what I had there. Yeah, that's the last thing that I had on my list. Covered a bunch of stuff. Hopefully it's not gotten too confusing. And I think that's where I wanted to close off. Is there anybody who wants to come off of mute? Did I miss anything? Oh, can you see timing tracks on other views? Certainly you can. So we have the new timing track here. If I go to my candy canes, it's there. You edit display elements. If it's not there, you can bring it over just like you did props. Remember how we added the candy canes? Maybe I want Santa to be in this view. If I don't want to see the timing track there, I can just click and erase it. You can also right click and, okay, if I go back to the master view, there's a new option now. If you right click here, add timing tracks to all views. So if you've gone and created other timing tracks, I'm just going to quickly create some other timing tracks. And if I go to a different view, we only got the one. If I come back to the master view, I can say right click and add the timing tracks to all the views so that you have those guidelines now to sequence to, right? There's the letter T. Um, yeah. Anything else? Yeah, David R is our Mac guy and says some of the vamp things don't work. Yeah. If I make a view with just my mega tree and I sequence my desired effects on the tree in the view, will it play back? Yes, yes. Any work you do um on these views will show up back in the master view. So it's just a way to narrow down your focus. Maybe you want to work on a certain section of your sequence. So you're going to eliminate the noise. You come in here, you just want to sequence on a certain part of it. You can narrow down your choices and it'll all come back here in the master view. See there, we added the arches as well. So maybe you have a bunch of groups and such that you don't really want to see. You can create a stripped down view just so that you can narrow your focus and not have to scroll up and down through all the different choices. And that's the way to do that. Okay. I think that's where I want to end this session. And yeah, we'll open it up for questions and such.
Okay, with that, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, Daryl. Just let you all know, next week we have Intro to xLights about controller types and setup of controllers, another introductory course. That's going to be given by Ron Armstrong. Don't miss it. But as always, these are recorded and uploaded to YouTube on the xLights Gems YouTube channel, which I will put the link in the chat momentarily. But again, thank you, Daryl, and we'll end it here.